Accepted?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
I'd just like to say I need to leave at 12:20 if we're not finished by then.
Okay. I won't make any comment. Conflicts of interest, I would declare that in the public excluded item in relation to the district licence and commission, I will be standing aside and asking my Deputy Chair, Councillor Crown, to chair that particular item. Is there any other conflict of interest?
I probably have a similar conflict.
Councillor Price, thank you. Any other conflicts of interest? Right. No public forum. Any announcements by the Mayor? No announcements by the Chair. Are there any minor matters relative to this committee that needs to be placed on the table? No, thank you. So we have no minutes to confirm, so we'll move to the first agenda item. Oh. Any announcements by management? No? Right. No minutes. Agenda item 1, reserve funding changes, and Caroline's going to speak to this particular item.
Thank you. Over the past few months, officers have undertaken a review of all of our reserves, their history and their uses. So we've taken a good look, gone through all the council reserves and identified that some of the funds in some of those reserves need to be moved around between the reserves so that we can accurately reflect the nature and purpose for which they are held. So over a number of years, Council have made payments into the financial contributions reserve from rates that had been transferred into the urban and suburban growth fund. That totals about 7.4 million in rates money that has ended up in the financial contributions reserve. The financial contributions reserve, the purpose of that is to hold funds collected from contributions from developers to fund the cost of new and expanded infrastructure to meet growth. So this recommendation is to more accurately reflect the purpose of that reserve and repurpose the money back into the suburban urban growth fund from where it came from in the first place. It also ensures that there's a clear separation of funds collected from the contributions and rates. So that means that the financial contributions reserve balance will reduce from 10.8 million to 3.4 million with that transfer, and the suburban urban fund will increase from 2.6 million to 10 million. The paper is also recommending a funding change for the district paying costs, asset management project and Te Awa investigation. So the costs for those projects are currently linked to the financial contributions reserve, which is not appropriate, and we're recommending that those there is a change to the funding source for those items so that they are funded from the suburban urban growth fund. So we're also recommending that the funding source is changed for curbside recycling, where it's currently being funded from the capital reserve, so that it is funded from the solid waste reserve. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions in relation to this matter? Mayor Wise.
Questions I've asked before, I thought it would be good to have them in this open forum. I'm just aware that in between the 25 long-term plan and the 2028 long-term plan, there was a significant reduction with regards to the financial contribution funded infrastructure budget. It's a mouthful, sorry. For the Te Awa structure plan in particular, and at the time it was indicated that there would be a review of that Te Awa structure plan and identification of the infrastructure required and how that would be funded going forward. So just seeking some reassurance that we're not actually putting ourselves at any risk around the infrastructure that's going to be required and how we'll fund that, because my understanding is that there is still quite a significant investment in infrastructure required. And where are we at with the planning around that, considering we've removed the budget associated with it?
I'll refer to Kath Bailey for that one.
Morning, through the chair. So yes, money was removed in the last LTP, where mainly because it was considered that Te Ao was too expensive to develop, and obviously given what's going on there now, it's clearly not. But there was a commitment to review the structure plan. Excuse me. So we're reviewing two key parts of that structure plan. We're looking at transportation and stormwater. Stormwater was the largest cost by far as part of that structure plan. So we have, thank you. We have a project manager on board at the moment to pull together all the different parts of the Te Awa structure plan. So that's looking at, we've got two consultants doing the review for transport and stormwater. And we're also looking at the work that we need to do to keep up with the development that's underway. So as part of that, we do have funds at the moment to do some key work which will enable the current development that's happening. So a lot of that is stormwater and the roading issues around Erickson Kenny Road. Sorry guys, must be coronavirus. Early? Too soon? Where was I at?
Erickson Road.
You're on the corner of Erickson and
Kenny
Road.
So we have received some income from some of the projects that are happening there to cover some of that work. But there's a bigger part of that looking at what is the timing with the developments that are coming in, when do they come on board, what is the physical work we need to do to service that, and how can we stage it. And then overall for the long-term plan, what funding do we need for the whole development, and that will tie in with the review of the structure plan that we're doing. So lots of moving parts in that space at the moment with a number of developers obviously working together. And we've got workshops next week to look at how the developments that are happening, particularly around that intersection, will all tie into each other. So there's quite a bit of work there, but we need to review those two key elements of the structure plan. What are the costs of those, the overall timing of works to enable different parts of that development to occur, and then we can finalise what the costs and the money that needs to be available in the long-term plan.
And just following on through the chair, with regards to the stormwater, because in the old long-term plan there was a significant investment in a pump station. So are we now looking at other options to address those stormwater issues?
So as you're aware, we've recently completed our stormwater model, and at the start of this year we've been going through some of the bits of the model that needed to be resolved. Now that model is basically ready to use, we're doing our stormwater master planning. So that's looking at our network-wide issues with stormwater. So we can't just look at Te Awa on its own, because there are parts of that stormwater network that might take parts of stormwater catchments elsewhere. So we need to look at how those work together. But in the original structure plan, there was a large cost for a big pump station. So part of the work we're doing will be looking to see, can we use other assets instead of that pump station, or what if we do need a pump station, where would that be located and what size would it be, and then what would that cost to deliver.
And sorry, last question. With regards to the financial contributions that have been collected by developers historically, are we confident that they have been used appropriately for what was the commitment made for those developments at the time, what it was collected for essentially?
You probably have to get Caroline to answer that one.
So we've completed a full reconciliation of the Te Awa structure plan reserve, and we can account for it. All monies going in and all monies going out are related to the Te Awa structure plan.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you. So, in moving this money, do we disadvantage anyone or any groups of people in leaving that funding reserve with a significantly lesser value to it?
So are you talking about the financial contributions
That's
account?
correct. Yeah.
So the financial contributions reserve will be left with money in it that has been collected only for the purpose of growth development.
So no one or no groups are disadvantaged by the move?
No.
Any further questions? Do I have a mover for?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
One question.
Yep.
You may
Councillor
have-
Tarpany.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may have already addressed this in part, but I understand that my question is around the solid waste component of the report. So is there still sufficient revenue in those accounts to cover the transition and rollout of the current program that's operating within the city at the moment? Because I understand there are delays between the containers, the wheelie bins, some complications around our provision of service. So will that transition period still be adequately covered?
Yes, it will. It'll leave a balance of around 2 million in the reserve after we've taken account of paying for the crates and the bins, and then the smoothing of the refuse and recycling contracts.
Cool. Thank you.
Only one more question. Through the chair.
Certainly.
Am I correct in my understanding that transferring these funds out of the financial contribution fund to the suburban development fund, I might have got that around the wrong way, urban development fund, that's actually more of a discretionary fund than,
Correct.
Suburban
urban growth fund.
Suburban-
Yes. Yeah.
we need to change that name. Okay, so essentially that means that it can be used for far wider use than what it could be used for if it was retained in the financial contribution fund.
That's correct.
Thank you.
It's an appropriate place.
And just through the chair, just to the rationale for doing that is there's legislation under which we can collect financial and development contributions. So we're providing that transparency for the reconciliation purposes for the funds that we receive in that space. So the other fund, as we've mentioned and as you identified, Mayor, is that you can still use for the purposes of growth or suburban projects, but it means that it's more at the discretion of council as to where those funds might be attributed to. The other funds are collected for a specific purpose, so we need to be able to account for that.
Any further questions? Do I have a mover for agenda item 1, reserve funding changes? Councillor Tarpany, seconder. Councillor Mawson. Councillor Tarpany, you want to speak to the...
I need a brief acknowledgement, if I may, Mr. Chair. So thank you very much for generating that work and bringing the summary of those funds back and providing that level of transparency and accountability for us all. Much appreciated, guys. Thank you.
Councillor Mawson?
Just, you always do great work. Thank you.
So the officer's recommendation, part A, B, C and D have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say...
I'd like to talk to the motion too.
Would you like to talk to it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to acknowledge Caroline and Ross in particular because I've been a little bit of a bugbear on this particular topic for you guys, and you've provided me with great information, so thank you for that. And I appreciate and understand that the aim of this process is to realign and recognise the purpose and source of our reserve funds, and it's been a good exercise to work through. For me, putting my conservative accountant's hat on at the moment, I still have a level of discomfort with removing these funds out of the financial contribution reserve without the costings and modelling being updated and completed for the Essential Services Development Plan and also the Te Awa Structure Plan. So for me, I'm just indicating that I'm erring on the side of caution and wanting to speak to that. So, thank you.
Does anybody else like to speak to the motion? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no?
Nay.
Nay? The motion is carried. Be recorded. Item 2 on the agenda is the Hawke's Bay Airport half-year report. We don't have any representatives of the airport here to today, and I will take that the report is read. So if there are any questions on relating to the report, Caroline's available. Do we have any questions?
And just through the chair, just have a comment that on the presentation that the airport did make to council at the end of last year, they did identify that they weren't going to be having a dividend in the current year. So I just wanted to acknowledge that through the report.
And I would just acknowledge that those who attended the briefing at the airport on whatever morning it was this week, that was reconfirmed, and I think everybody now has a very good understanding of the airport business and the flexibility or around when dividends will be paid. So hopefully that seminar that they provided gave everybody a good insight into how their business operates. Okay, so the purpose of the report is to receive the half-year report to stakeholders from the Hawke's Bay Airport Limited to the 31st of December 2019. Do I have someone to move that?
I'll move.
Councillor Crystal, seconder. Councillor Price. Anybody like to speak to it? Councillor Crystal, Price. Anyone else? The Mayor? Councillor Tarpany?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, nay. Carried. Item 3. Let me find it. 18. It's the digital one, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, digital property file fee amendment, and I believe there is an error in the officer's recommendation. If you look at Part A, resolve to amend the fees for digital property files to the following: full digital property file $40, the building file only $30, and that also needs to be changed in the paper on page 20. Proposed fees and charges, building file only $30. So we have Rachel. Would you like to just give a brief explanation?
Yes, thank you. I'd first like to introduce Tui Tongariro. I don't know if you've been introduced to him yet. He's our lead for our records management team. And it's his team who are doing all of this hard work around the digitisation project. So, yes, my apologies for the error in the paper. It is my fault. The idea of the building file only fee being $30, and then an additional fee of $15 to be charged for subsequent full information is set at a level we think is an incentive for people to, in the first place, obtain the full digital property file fee. That's based on the idea that we want people to have all the information that they can have before they make, decisions around property, which can be really big decisions. So that's my error. In terms of this paper generally, however, I just wanted to say as a précis that we undertook in 2017, commenced a digitisation, property file digitisation project. It's really hard to say that one. And the fee was originally set by council last year to recover the costs of that project. I'm going to try and say it again. And for the life of the project. And what we found is that we got some feedback, and we want to respond to that feedback from the users of that service. And some of the feedback that we received was that, the full digital property file fee, they didn't need the whole thing. And some of them considered that the $95 fee was too high. But many really appreciated having a digital and online service. Previously, as it says in the paper, members of the public used to come into the counter and handle the original property file. And whilst that was a very good service for those who were local and could come into the counter, to the service centre, it wasn't a fair service across all people who needed to view property files. So the digitisation project is a step towards, digitising most of our services in council, and protecting our information and our data that we have around property files. So based on the feedback that we received anecdotally, we decided to do a little survey of our users. So we had 300 plus users since the fee came in on the 1st of July last year, and we surveyed all of those users around what sort of service would they like to receive, and you'll see those results in there. But the full property digital file was the service that was most preferred by all of our users. The second most popular was just the building plans. However, the building file, which is the recommendation we've made to you, contains all of those plans and everything, houses, the drainage plans and things like that. So we felt, in the interest of giving people all the right information to make their decisions about property, we would prefer to give them the complete building file and not just parts of it. And so our recommendation to you is set out in there, that we reduce the fee for the full digital property file from $95 to $40, and that we offer a secondary service, if you like, for people who don't feel that they need the whole file, of a building file only for $30.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Rachel? Councillor Price?
Just one question. If there's not enough information on what the request is, do we still charge them? And I'll use an example of a plumber who's putting a fire into an old house, and there's not enough information for him to be able to proceed with the file we have. Do we still charge them?
In that, are you saying that the digital property file doesn't contain the information?
Yeah, so they to get a permit, there's not enough information for them to be able to go any further with that. Do we still charge them?
It would be, I would imagine, very rare for there not to be a floor plan on a file for the fire installer to utilise. I think that would be a really rare occasion. If there has been a couple of rare occasions where that's happened, and we've used our discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGrath?
It's through the chair. Before we started going digital, what was the fee?
So it was, to come in and view the hard copy original was free to users, but only available to those who could. And there was a $250 fee for a digital property file for those who couldn't.
So you could walk, prior to doing this, you could have walked into council with your phone or your iPad and requested it and taken photos of it all for free?
Yes, that's right. You requested the file, and the whole file was in front of you to do what you wished. A lot of people chose to photocopy the file.
I guess the the issue with that would be on the customer side. That's great that they have that access. That access could also be to the detriment of the integrity of the file. Things could get removed or added. There was no controls over what the users did with the files.
Councillor Wright?
So does this mean that people can no longer walk into the service centre and view a hard copy of their file?
That's what we'd like to have happen. They can certainly view the property file. If they don't have a means to receive something digitally, they can come into council offices and view it on our computers if they've requested and paid for it. But yes, we would like the access, if you like, to the digital property files, to the hard copy property files to stop.
Is there a time frame for that?
Well, it's really started from 1st of July last year when the fee was put in place. We have at times let people still get the original file, but I think that we need to now take the step forward around that for the purposes of why we started the digitisation project in the first place.
Thank you.
Councillor Tarpany, and followed by Councillor Brown.
Great work, guys. It's great to read the report and see you making some real common sense decisions to make the digital files more accessible. My question is more around the project overall, the digitisation of our records. I remember it coming before council and specific equipment being purchased to enable us to digitise our files. How are we tracking on that project overall?
We're about 32% through, so a third. It's going well, with the proviso that staff come and go, and yeah, it takes a little while to get people back up to speed again, and you get a few leave all at once. That also can cause disruption. But we're on track and keeping up with our SLAs, so.
Oh boy, great work, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, is there a need for paper copies for people? So someone who doesn't have access to a device, could they come in and request a printed version?
Yeah, I mean, we you can use discretion to deal with, you know, those unique situations where people don't have access, and we're happy to do that. But we would need to make that copy for them and provide that to them rather than giving them access to the actual original file. Yeah.
And in that situation, obviously it's your discretion, but would you, for example, still charge them the $40?
Yes, we would. The work involved is still the same. So there's quite a bit of work, you know, Tui can probably talk to you about the quality of these files, the condition they're in, the unusual sizes of them, you know, some of them, the commercial property files particularly, you know, can be boxes and boxes. We're not just talking about a file, you know, we're talking boxes of for one property. And to get that integrity and that digitisation, you know, to get the reading integrity is really important as a quality control as well. So there's quite a bit of work in that, fetching and retrieving and coordinating, linking through our online system.
Follow-up
You
question?
have a follow-up? Yeah.
What do you do with the files once they're digitalised?
So they get tagged and prepared for archiving. And probably once we've got a greater percentage, more than 33% or whatever, we will then do bulk archiving of those files. Like most of our official information, there is rules around how we are meant to retain and archive and treat official information. Yeah.
Councillor McGrath and then Mayor Wise.
Just through the chair, in the early stages when we started this, it was reported back that there was a lot of inaccuracies when we did quality checks on how well we'd scanned the files. Has that improved in recent times? Because I think we made some changes and brought it back in-house. Is that correct?
That's right. The project originally started out to be an outsourced contract, and we found that quality and the ability for them to do the volumes and have the turnaround that we wanted wasn't there. So yes, we now have the in-house capability, which is Tui leads.
Mayor Wise?
Thank you, through the chair. I'd like to say thank you for actually recognising and responding to the concerns that were raised by community members around these increased fees and coming back with this new proposal. Should this be passed successfully, what date do you expect the new fees to be implemented from?
Well, we would imagine implementing it immediately. So at the moment, you know, it's $95, so the faster we can reduce that fee will satisfy our customers.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Wright?
In the interests of expediency, could we consider making this a decision of council today?
Yes.
Well, there's either that option or it goes to the full council in March,
12th of March.
12th of March. It's only 10 days away. Yeah.
Saves some admin time. Seems more doing a decision of council today.
Doing it is better decision. You want to do the decision? Yeah, okay, we will make it a decision of council. Do we have anybody else who wants to ask a question?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, a few of the comments here from users of the service have said that Hastings District Council is free. Can you please elaborate on that a little bit?
Hastings District Councils, I understand, have completed their digitisation project. And there will come at a point where when we complete our digitisation project and we've cost recovered, that we will make a decision as to whether we charge it all or whether we charge a nominal fee still for, you know, some of the work that is to maintain and fetch and deal with that digital thing. But most councils across New Zealand are embarking on this, and they're all at different stages. And also different councils make different funding and how they fund these sorts of things. You know, my view is that this is a user benefit, and that general rate funding wouldn't be appropriate to use for a service that gives a individual benefit to either a homeowner or particularly a commercial business. where a commercial business has a benefit through this service.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowe.
Yes, I have a question also. Will this come back to us under the usual fees and charges decisions that we make once a year?
Yes, it will. So the 2021 fees and charges, this will now go on there, if it's not already, I believe, and you'll be resetting that for the coming year. This is really just for the rest of this year.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Right, so the officer's recommendation is that this committee resolve to amend the fees for digital property files to the following: full digital property file $40, building file only $30, and a reduced fee of $15 will be charged if a customer subsequently requests a full digital property file on a property after previously only requesting a building file. Do I have someone to move?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Councillor Price. Someone to second that? Councillor Wright. Any comments? Anybody like to make a further comment? Okay, in the absence of that, we'll put that, move that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Contrary? Say no.
The decision of council.
Yeah.
Second. 1 moment, please.
We're just putting that up.
Yeah.
Just need to check the reason for this. For the decision of council is required to enable the immediate implementation of the immediate of the limited fee. Is
Yeah.
this right or?
Yep.
Okay.
So Councillor Wright has moved that we make this a decision of council. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bogue. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Okay. Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. The next item on the agenda is item 4. Here we have lovely names again. Policy, the council organisation appointments and remuneration. To present the council organisation appointments and remuneration policy for adoption. I think it's quite self-explanatory that in the 4.2, the main change to the attached policy is its name, from the remuneration of authority and council policy to the council organisation appointments and remuneration policy. Are there any questions? We don't have governance other than Cherie sitting here, but Adele's happy to answer any questions.
Through the chair, not really a question per se, but just I found it interesting reading the required skills and experience section of the policy, and that for a CCO with annual turnover in excess of 500,000, the people should, as a minimum, have the following skills: intellectual ability. I was quite intrigued as to know how one would assess that. But a CCO with turnover of less than 500,000, they didn't need to have intellectual ability. I'm just wondering whether perhaps there's we reword that.
Through the chair, we can reword that. What we've also done is align this with Hastings.
As we all know, intellectual ability is very subjective.
Diversity.
So perhaps just some rewording in there before we adopt it.
Yeah.
So you'd like to leave it on the table and we can come back
Yes,
with some
please.
options. Yes.
Okay.
And we'll make sure it's aligned.
Thank you.
So we're going to leave it on the table or till the next? Okay, so we'll leave that.
Sorry, for the next, Prosperous Napier or
For
the
the
council?
full council.
Full council.
We'll bring it back to full
We'll put it
council,
on.
I think.
Bring it forward.
Unless there's any other points that are raised by the councillors today, we'll put a recommendation through for that change and bring it back to the council meeting.
Do you need to move it, those on the table?
I think you almost better to have a recommendation saying that you want that wording changed.
Okay.
And for it to be brought back for a decision to adopt at the full council meeting based on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to
What was the,
move
what
and
section
amend
was it?
the motion.
Under 500.
33.
Yeah. H&A.
Required skills and experience on page 33.
Be reviewed
Yeah.
and brought back to
Required
skills and experience.
Drop point 1. Through the chair, you might, I mean, you could just remove that entirely, because I think it talks about an understanding of governance issues, business experience, so it does follow on as to what the requirement actually entails. So you could actually remove
Or we
it.
just leave it as reviewed for now, and then whatever that ends up being, rather than, The officers review the required skills and experience criteria.
And report this to
Council
Council
for adoption.
for adoption.
The next council meeting for adoption.
Stop some people applying for jobs.
Cutting out the dummies.
It's good to be last meeting.
No, it's. Wait, isn't it?
Oh, I can't remember, I got rid of it.
In the next full council meeting. Is the next council meeting? Just a question, is the next council meeting our full council meeting? It's not a standing committee, so I
Yeah.
just wondered if it was the next full council meeting.
That's
just to
council, this is
specify it.
committee, so it's council.
So that officers
Capital C will do it.
skills and experience criteria in the council organisations appointments policy.
Yeah.
Bring this back to whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Number page 4.
So we have to adopt this name change at the same time.
Yeah.
The apostrophe, but anyway, we'll sort that out.
Councillor Brown,
Just a query on the wording under conflicts of interest. It says that all directors are appointed at the pleasure of the council and may be dismissed for breaches of this code. Just interested in people's thoughts around the wording of at the pleasure of the council. Sounds very Queen-like. You serve at Her Majesty's pleasure. So.
At the
Is that-
discretion, would that be better, discretion of the council? What's wrong with pleasure?
Through the chair, we're happy to take the recommendation and we can bring that through as a change as well.
And other suggested
amendments.
amendments.
Regarding. With respect to, regarding.
And other suggested amendments with regard to wording of the council organisation appointments. Okay, is everybody happy with that resolution as it's written?
The
That
second.
the officers review the required skills and experience criteria and other suggested amendments with regard to wording of the council organisation appointments and remuneration policy and bring this back to the next council meeting for adoption.
Second.
Do I have a mover?
Happy to move.
Mayor Wise, seconder.
Second.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Any comment? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, contrary, nay. Carried. I think that's all we have in the,
Can I just clarify the action point for that to come back for officers to follow up before council? So I didn't catch Councillor Brown's because I was in the middle.
oh, that was around the wording of at the pleasure
And the conflicts of interest.
under conflicts. On page 34, all directors are appointed at the pleasure of the council and may be dismissed for breaches of this code, which I would sort of assume comes from the Institute of Directors Code of Ethics, but just we may like to reword that. Okay, that's good. So that's all on our open agenda. We need to close that? Or, yeah. So we'll close the open agenda at 11:45 and move into public excluded. Do I have someone to